2 years ago, I had the opportunity to attend a technology convention. We were assigned to different tables, and as the event was finishing, people started moving around. A man came to our table, and we somehow ended up talking about anime. We were in a technology convention, and there's this link between technology, gaming, and anime, and that was evident in the expo, because there were arcades that had games with anime-looking characters. And somehow we ended up with the question, why is anime like that? Like, why are girls and women pictured with big boobs and that kind of stuff? And this guy clearly had an answer. Would you try guessing? Well, the answer he gave was simple, because it's made by men for men. To say that it was made by men for men, it's a simple way of understanding that the results are shaped from the perspective of one gender. You might be wondering, what does this have to do with pop music? Well, it has a lot to do, because something similar happens in the music industry, where most people at power are men, and they have influence on the image and work of the artist. Let's see these two pictures. On the left, do you recognize the style of this art? Do you know who the artist is? This is a yellow pumpkin by Yayoi Kusama. When you hear the name of the artist Yayoi Kusama, can you recall her face? Now, on the right, do you know who she is? When you hear her name, could you recall her face if the picture wasn't there? Can you mention any of her albums or songs? The songs that you can remember, do you know who wrote them? Well, she is Britney Spears, and most likely more people can recall her face more than the face of any painter out there. Even though both are forms of art, the final products are different. In the case of a sculpture or painting, the artist can decide what to portray and can choose whether or not she or he wants to be part of the final piece. So the relevance is on the piece of art itself and what it represents. But in the case of songs, it's more tricky, because singers are part of the final product as performers. The focus is on the artist of the song. When you listen to a good song with a beautiful voice, one of the first things you probably think is, who is singing this? What were they feeling when they sang that song? And more than once you were curious what kind of person they are and what they look like. This happens because the voice is a musical instrument that you cannot transfer. It's very personal and unique. And that might explain why the singer's face is generally advertised with the songs they are performing. Some exceptions might be Sia, Daft Punk, Gorillaz, Marshmello. To understand women in pop music, we have to go back in time. I'm not going to dig into deep on history, but it's important to see relevant facts. Let's start with ancient Greece, because the way Western societies are today was built upon many of the ideas established back then. There was music at that time, but they couldn't record it, so they found a way to write it down, and the ones who worked on it were all men, because at that time women were deemed intellectually inferior. We have to remember that it was a patriarchal society, so women were expected to depend on men, be loyal to her husband, and devote herself to house activities and raising children. Because of this, women participation in playing music was limited to important ceremonies, and it wasn't just in ancient Greece. In many parts of the world, patriarchy arose as a social system. Looking into ideas from behavioral biology and evolutionary psychology, we get a different understanding of gender differences. After all, men and women have physical and hormonal differences that affect the way we are. Unfortunately, most mechanisms for the survival of the species make more sense in the wild than in our current modern life. Biology and power had great influence in shaping society, but biology shouldn't be used to justify the use of power over others, and the ones at power are not necessarily the most intelligent nor understanding. The oppression towards women intellect by patriarchal ideology also affected in the creation of music. It doesn't mean there were no female composers and artists. There were, but most of the talent couldn't gain recognition. There was lack of support from their family and society. Women were not accepted in these male-dominated areas. That's more reason why we should give more credit to the female composers before the 1900s. I personally want to highlight Cassia's non-liturgical verse. I hate the rich man moaning as if he were poor. What a badass. Hildegard of Bingen, for composing both music and words herself, which was already rare at that time, and Clara Schumann for setting new standards of playing by memory, and also for changing the public's taste by defining different kinds of pieces played at recitals. Basically, she was setting trends. What an influencer! A way to solve the gender bias is with blind auditions. This allowed more women to play in orchestras, but that started more recently, around the 1970s and 1980s. From the 1900s to the present, more and more women are participating in the music industry, so you might think the gender problem is solved. Actually, no. Women are widely accepted as entertainers, so it's common to see women perform music, but not creating it. To understand the present, let's see how the four waves of feminism changed music over time. The first wave was possible with the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution meant for women more inclusion in society as they entered the workforce. Being in the public sphere meant they could be part of a community with other women. This allowed them to fight for equality and rights to vote. The song The March of the Women became the anthem for the women's social and political union. In jazz music, black female musicians were also part of the movement. They were able to develop further musically when men were deployed for war. Around this first half of century, Dorothy Fields wrote hundreds of songs for Broadway musicals and films. Judy Garland sang her signature song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Carmen Miranda gained a reputation in the US as the Brazilian bombshell, and Sister Rosetta Tharpe became an overnight sensation with hits that would later influence rock and roll singers like Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, and Little Richard. After the Second World War, men returned and women were told to leave work and go back home, reinforcing traditional gender roles. The mass media was whitewashed, and the economic boom allowed young people to change the status quo. This change was also reflected in entertainment. People saw successful women working outside their homes. Marilyn Monroe became important in changing society's attitude towards sexuality, as she played roles focused on her sex appeal and appeared in the first issue of Playboy magazine. All that happened in the 50s contributed to the counterculture in the 60s. This is where the second wave of feminism took place, the women's liberation movement. This meant a boom of female singer-songwriters like Carole King, Buffy Sainte-Marie, and Loretta Lynn, who were equally capable of producing hits. And as the civil rights movement grew, we also got to appreciate more black female artists. In the beginning of the 90s, the Red Girl movement appeared in the punk music scene. They contributed to the rise of the third wave of feminism around 1992. I would summarize this wave as a discussion of what is the definition of feminism and what is included in the movement. While they were discussing, Madonna dropped her fifth studio album, Erotica, and her coffee table book, Sex. You can see with the reaction that society wasn't prepared for that. Also, during the 90s, Lauryn Hill released her solo album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Spice Girls and Destiny's Child became international sensations, and we saw a rise in singer-songwriters. To mention a few, Mariah Carey, Alicia Keys, Fiona Apple, Alanis Morissette, and Sheryl Crow. Coming to the present, the fourth wave of feminism started around 2012. It became even more widespread with the Me Too movement. Thanks to the power of social media, celebrities and people from all parts of society came forward with their stories. This meant a major change in how society gives relevance to these issues. The fourth wave of feminism seeks empowerment, equality, and justice for women in society. This is also reflected in the music industry. Efforts are being made by artists, people working behind the scenes, and administrative positions. The most visible change in narrative that I see is the empowerment of women's sexuality and image. For example, for many, Christina Aguilera was overly sexualizing herself with the video of Dirty from her album Stripped, and that's why it became so controversial. But in reality, she was taking control of her image, and she decided to show how empowered she was on her sexuality. Now it's more common for people to see it from the empowerment perspective, which allows us to appreciate her art the way she meant it. It took a major shift in great part of society's attitude to actually see the same thing in a different light. The most relevant album, I would say, is the concept album Lemonade by Beyoncé. At first glance, it's about infidelity, but it also expressed views on politics, respect for black women, and other topics related to history of black people and feminist ideals. Many other female artists have achieved great impact on people through music. To mention some, Rihanna, Taylor Swift, Adele, Nicki Minaj, Jennifer Lopez, Katy Perry, Selena Gomez, Amy Winehouse, Cardi B, Miley Cyrus, Lady Gaga, and many more. We are blessed with so many amazing artists, and not just in Western pop music, but also pop music from other parts of the world. In the last decade, K-pop have gained international popularity. To summarize, as society evolved, women fought for rights, equality, and social justice. Great progress was made in the four waves of feminism. That is translated into the music industry as a rise in the number of female songwriters and performers, gaining recognition for their work by having more commercial success and winning more awards. And it's not just about numbers, it also made a difference in the content. Women express their experiences and their perspectives on relationships and emotions. This transitioned into messages of empowerment in the last decades. You can see that music evolves as society evolves, and society grows as they see their artists grow. We cannot forget that technology played a crucial role in the evolution of music. The number of artists increased overall, but to get a clear general view, we must contrast the number of total performers, songwriters, producers, administrative positions and total awards won for each gender, and you'll see there's still a gap. This is why we should encourage women in our lives to further pursue their careers and dreams. For the ones who don't know how the music industry works, this is for you to get a general idea. First, you have the major record labels. They used to be 4, and now there are only 3, Sony, Universal and Warner. EMI used to be the 4th one. For more insights, you can see the documentary Artifacts. This documentary exposes so much of the music industry, especially at a time where great changes were happening. So major record labels, in simple words, it's in charge of work done at international scale. The artist could be signed to the major label, or one of its subsidiaries, and if the artist wants more creative freedom, could sign to an indie label. You can see that the artists are in the lowest part of the corporate hierarchy, so they are subjected to the conditions of the industry, and at times they lose autonomy on their music. Here are the people more involved in the music than in the business. You can see that if the singer-songwriter is a woman, she will be more likely to be surrounded by men, because the other fields are still male-dominated professions. Being an artist is already difficult as it is highly competitive, and being a female artist is even more challenging. Now, thanks to social media, things are changing for good. Record labels are no longer the gatekeepers to reach a larger audience anymore. The book Invisible Woman mentions many examples where data collections is made taking men as references. This leads to designs that ignores the experiences for women. Taking the piano as an example, this is a musical instrument that has standard measures for everyone to play. But in reality, those are standard measures that fit the hands of an average adult man. A study made in 2015 examined the highest level ranked pianists. From the top 12 ranked internationally, only 2 were women. This study also measured handspan, and the handspan of those 2 women happened to be larger than average. So instead of looking at skills, we should look at the design. And something similar happens in other industries. This means there are still gaps in our knowledge. There's a lot we need to change. If you search for celebrities dealing with sexist comments, you can find amazing clapbacks that can make your day. You can also notice that even respected female celebrities have been subjected to mansplaining, double standards, and sexual harassment. As public figures, they have to deal with sexism from interviewers, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. Let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of a female artist. When she goes to work, most people around her are men, especially those at positions of power. She has to work harder to prove herself. She has to toughen up and speak up when things get ugly, because no one else will protect her better than herself. And after, she has to deal with paparazzi, crazy fans, and social media. Now, apart from the daily grind she has to go through, as an artist and as a celebrity, she has to deal with periods. Women menstruate for around 5 days every month, and it's not just bleeding. There's also period cramps, which could be very painful. If you're a man, you can think of it as being kicked in the balls every month for about 5 consecutive days. It's that same kind of internal pain that goes through your whole body. To what degree of pain can it be for us? Well, that will depend on each woman, and it could vary month to month, from simple discomfort to unbearable pain that you cannot move. This pain makes sense from the perspective of evolution, because it prepares women for the pain of pregnancy and childbirth. But the thing is, nobody asked us if we wanted to be born male or female, and even less, nobody asked us if we wanted to have children. What a pain in the uterus. Despite this, female artists show up to work professionally. The tour doesn't stop because of period cramps. And this goes for all women out there working and studying. Even on their period, you deserve respect. Having a period is different. It's something that you cannot control voluntarily, so women shouldn't be shamed on having periods. To create safer working environments and better results, it's important to have women in positions of power and decision making. The different visions can balance things out and make everything better in the long run. Trust me, women can run the world. Leadership can be taught. There's research on that, and there's evidence if we look back in history. The book When Women Ruled the World talks about female rulers in ancient Egypt. Other monarchies had queens on the throne, and in the present, there are women as president in many countries as well. When you see someone, what makes you define that person as beautiful? This question is so subjective, I know. Your answers will probably reflect great diversity, but that wasn't what we saw in mass media around us. They had a different definition of beauty that could be traced back from the 50s. Around that time, books about sex were starting to appear. Many ideas of psychoanalysis and the unconscious mind, developed by Sigmund Freud, were also very widespread. He developed ideas about sexuality in children, women, and men that were somehow used to justify the exploitation of sexuality and business. But it was the sexual revolution in the 60s that led to major changes on society's views on sex. Ironically, Hugh Hefner had started Playboy not long before and openly supported sexual liberation. The liberation of women's body should have had a positive impact, but we have to remember that people at positions of power were dominated by men. And in the music industry, it meant that women's body were on many occasions portrayed from the perspective desired by men. The beauty standards defined in the 50s was a young, thin, and white woman, oftentimes superficial, and it's what has persisted for many decades. Women didn't have a voice in the way they do now with social media. The differences in gender is also reflected on tabloids, where most gossip articles and pictures are female celebrities. Unfortunately, there are incentives to make money, which means if sexualizing your image sells, more than one would do it in this competitive industry. More than one was pressured to do it. More than one was forced to have that image, and more than one was subjected to sexual harassment from men who abused their power. Of course, we cannot leave out the women who were truly empowered. They paved the way for other women, but they still had to struggle with what others had to say. Women celebrities have to deal with many things that most male celebrities don't have to deal with. Why are they paying a different price for fame? The expression of sexuality, confidence, sense of style, and struggles with criticism and hardships under the spotlight turned divas like Madonna, Janet Jackson, Judy Garland, Cher, Donna Summer, and Lady Gaga into gay icons. More and more female artists are making the difference by openly supporting LGBTQ communities and celebrating diversity. We should love us for who we are. Living in the spotlight is very hard, and growing up in the spotlight doesn't make it any easier. Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato, and Miley Cyrus were Disney stars that transitioned into a more mature image as they were growing as artists and as human beings. They had to deal with mental health issues and heavy criticism while working under pressure. Taylor Swift became so successful that there were people who wanted part of that success. Dealing with issues under the spotlight can also make things worse. Courtney Love and Ariana Grande were blamed for the death of their loved ones. Losing someone you love is already painful, and being blamed for their death is just too cruel and so wrong. Honestly, if you want to blame someone, you should start with the media and the paparazzi. In worst cases, all these pressures have taken lives of singers. It's not easy to be a woman celebrity. Good news, things are changing. We are more empowered. We get to see more diversity than before. Singers from past decades are still making music. Female artists with different ethnicity and body types are also topping the charts, contrary to the belief that if you didn't fit the stereotype, nobody would want you in the industry. We are voicing out our problems. Organizations are supporting women in the industry, and we're getting more recognition for our work. When there's progress on technology, industries change. Social media has played a big role. People who were not likely to be part of the music industry have been able to share their songs and pursue their dream career. Lily Allen, Charli XCX, and Adele were noticed through their MySpace account, and Billie Eilish went viral on SoundCloud. This has empowered artists on their image. They can have direct interaction with their fans and speak their truth. Social media also allows more power to the consumer, so it's important that you make the difference by supporting what's right. I say this because there have been famous male artists involved in cases of sexual assault and other kinds of inappropriate behavior. Another issue that comes with technology is hackers invading people's privacy. They have threatened and released nude pictures of celebrities. The criminal should be under the spotlight, but instead the focus is on the celebrity, and the artist did nothing wrong. Those pictures were meant to be private. They lost control on their image, and the hacker used that to have power over them. Something that could influence the future of music is artificial intelligence. Lil Miguela and Miku Hatsune are virtual characters, and they are both female, so if the people behind their image are men, the way they present themselves could be biased. even if these characters do not exist in real life, they can still have influence on people. So it's important that they are also empowered characters. With all the topics covered, it's clear how important it is to have diversity represented in music and positions of power, not just acknowledging diversity in gender, but also diversity in age, race, religion, and sexual orientation. All of this is to make society more inclusive and have a positive impact on everyone's lives by speaking up our own truths. Spread the love. Bye.